Hi. So, if you were attending services this last Shabbat, you know that this coming Shabbat will be Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. And First of all, it's very interesting that we call this month Menachem Av. Menachem meaning comfort, and Av, of course, the month when we remember the destruction of the temples, and so many other tragedies and losses in our history. And so it's interesting to think that this month that is really a reminder of so much pain and discomfort should actually be in some way a comfort. And as it happens, this week I was studying in my chavruta um, a piece from the Likutei Moharan. And Adi, if you want to bring that up, that would be great. All right. So he says, so first of all, just to set the stage a little bit, he's been talking about a situation where someone who's down, sort of down and depressed, is some place where people are dancing, maybe a simcha, and his friend sort of pulls him in, right? And he allows his friend to pull him in, even though he says it's sort of, he forces him. And for a little bit, it's as if his gloom and suffering is sort of standing to the side. The way he describes it almost sounds like a wallflower. You can sort of imagine his gloom sort of sitting at the outside of the circle of dancing, sort of petulantly waiting for him to return. But he says it's the same with happiness. When a person is happy, gloom and suffering stand aside. Yet greater still, it is to gather courage to actually pursue gloom and to introduce it into joy. And actually, the word he uses in Hebrew, it means to bring it into joy, such that the gloom itself turns into joy. A person should transform gloom and all suffering into joy. It is like a person who comes to a celebration. The abundant joy and happiness then transforms all their worries, depression, and gloom into joy. We find that he has grabbed the gloom and introduced it against its will, against the will of the gloom, into the joy, as in the aforementioned analogy. So when I was reading this, I thought it was really interesting because he's talking about, and he repeats this idea several times, and he uses sort of the language of like pursuing, like almost running after, right? And it made me think about the experience of sitting with discomfort. Um, and interestingly enough, the word menachem actually has in it the word for to rest or to sit still, right? To be still. Um, so I wanted to spend a little time with that today in today's meditation. And so I'm going to invite you first to come to a comfortable seated position. If you are in a chair, then you'll want to have your feet securely planted on the ground and your back upright, your shoulders dropped. You want to be in a place of comfort and stillness, but also dignity. And you can turn your attention to your breath and to this body where you are resting your awareness. Just noticing for a few moments the movement of your breath. And as you turn your attention to the sensations in your body and the movement of your breath, you may notice that there's some place of discomfort within the sensation of your body. So perhaps it's a joint or a muscle that is tight. Perhaps it is an ache or a pain. It might be very, very small. Or it might be an emotional sensation. Just allow your attention to rest on that, approaching it with curiosity and openness, not trying to fix it or change it, not trying to figure it out for the moment, just exploring what is there. And if it should happen that you are lucky enough today to be free of any physical or emotional discomfort, you might try inviting a sense of that spirit of Rav, that reflecting on suffering, by simply placing your hands on your head, the way you might if you were feeling overwhelmed by anguish. And just noticing what that feels like, being with that. Just allowing yourself to be with whatever sensation is there. Being patient with it and tender. As if you were saying, it's okay, sweetie. You just do what you need to do there. And if you should find that resting your attention becomes too intense, if the focus on this discomfort becomes too intense, tight, perhaps forced, just allow it to loosen, almost as if you were zooming out with a camera. So that that place of discomfort is still held in your attention, but with spaciousness surrounding it. Likewise, if you find that that discomfort should recede in its intensity, that's all right. You don't need to hold on to it. You can just let it go and turn your attention to whatever else may arise. And now for the last few moments of this sit, you can release your attention and turn it back to your breath and the movement of the breath in the body. Just allowing that to wash over you and seep into you. And when it is time to finish, I will ring a bell.
Thank you so much, Cantor Heather Batchelor, for that so skillfully led and beautiful practice. Looking forward to exploring that some more in a few minutes. Friends, as we always do, we seal the practice by offering an opportunity for those in mourning or observing the yard site to recite the mourner's Kaddish, and invite those of you who are to, if you'd like, to put the name or names of anyone who you're holding in your heart today in the chat box, either now or after the recitation of Kaddish. I invite you to join me in rising in body or in spirit, and for the rest of us to simply be present and to hold with love those who are grieving today. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'yalma Divrah Chilutei, V'yalich Malchutei, Chayechon, V'yamechon, V'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael, Bagala V'zman Kariv, V'yimir Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Nevarach, Olam Amaya, Yitbrach V'yishtabach, Yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh, Adar V'yitalev V'yitalal, Shemei D'kudsha B'richu, La'ela Yimko B'rachata V'shivata, Tush B'chata V'nechemata, Tal Yiran Ba'alma, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba V'yom Shemaya, L'chaim Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael V'yomru Amen. Oseh Shalom V'romav, Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael V'yal Kol Anshei Tevet V'yomru Amen. Friends, thank you so much, as always, for joining us today for practice. If you're leaving us now, we hope you'll join us tomorrow to sit into Shabbat with Marita Anderson, who'll be leading us. And we hope to see you tomorrow or sometime soon next week. For those who are able to stay on for conversation and questions with Cantor Heather Batchelor, you're welcome to do so. Many, many thanks to Renee Barno and to Harris Sokolov for sponsoring today's practice. For Renee, in memory of her mom, Ruth Krause; for Harris, in memory of his dad, David Nathan Sokolov; And again, may their memories be a blessing in your lives, the lives of all those they touched while they were in this world. And may their souls be elevated through the merit of our practice today. Thanks to Adi Stein, as always, for handling and holding our space with skill and grace. And if you do have a question for Heather about today's teaching, please put it in the chat box, and I'll try to keep an eye on that and bring that into the conversation. I also want to um, put Heather. I think I'm going to put there you go. So I'm putting Cantor Heather's website link into the chat box, where you can get more information about Heather's offerings and her music. Heather, thank you so much. As I said, I just thought this was so skillfully led, and it reminded me, I think, right around this time, maybe it was on Tisha B'Av. Was it on Tisha B'Av where we did that practice of holding our heads in anguish and grief? So today's practice, among other things, was about working with challenging emotions, right? And this teaching from Rabbi Nachman, wow, that's so interesting and challenging, just for people who may not know. He's also renowned for his teaching that one should always, it's a great mitzvah to be in a state of simcha, of joy always. This from somebody who seems to have suffered from manic depressive illness, and was not, struggled probably to be in that state frequently. So just a little background and context for that. So I really would love to explore this, this image of joy, kind of like, as you put it, like going over to the wallflower and say, come on, we're dancing. Sadness, we're dancing. I'm also thinking of Inside Out, for those of you who have seen that film. If you haven't, you must see that film, Inside Out, Pixar movie where emotions are these characters who are alive in the body. Have you seen that, Heather, by the way? Ever seen it?
No, that's
Oh my
intriguing.
God, gotta see that.
Oh, wait. Yeah.
Sadness is a character, and joy is a character,
Yeah.
and their relationship between joy and sadness is actually the centerpiece of the movie. So you definitely have to go see that.
Yeah.
So, but here's my question. I'm going to put the question because I thought I anticipated the objection of, doesn't that sound like you're forcing? Doesn't sound like forcing gloom and anguish and sadness to be, thinking of Bobby McFerrin here. Don't worry, be happy, right? It sounds
Yeah, well,
glib. I know
yeah,
I know that's not the teaching. So
yeah, that's not the teaching. And by the way, that the teaching that you mentioned comes like right after this. It's like the next parak.
mm-hmm.
And there's a lovely tune, klezmer tune, or not klezmer tune, but there's a lovely Hasidic tune actually. And I was tempted to sing it, but I wasn't quite certain if it was appropriate to this meditation. Right. So I think that that's sort of exactly what he's addressing, right? Is he's saying we can sort of shove gloom to the side, sort of that image of like you go off and you distract yourself with dancing, and the gloom is still sitting there. The gloom is like the wallflower,
Mm-hmm.
petulantly just waiting, just waiting. You just when you come back, I'll be here, right? Whereas then he says that there's this higher possibility, and that is the possibility that we actually go after,
Mm-hmm.
right? We sort of pursue,
Mm-hmm.
right? He uses the word to pursue, like we
Mm-hmm.
pursue it,
Mm-hmm.
and we sort of grab a hold of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, and I think it's the way I want to understand that. Of course, whether or not Nachman actually was thinking of the same process, as he doesn't actually give us a specific practice there to use, but I like to think of it as the same kind of practice of like saying, I'm going to get, I'm going to, rather than push that away, which is what I think our tendency is,
Right.
rather than like push that away,
Right.
I'm going to get up real close to it and say like, okay, I'm going to be with this,
Hmm.
and just let that, feeling be there.
You did that so beautifully, by the way. I just thought, like, as people were, the holding the anguish and sadness with tenderness and compassion, in an embodied way, I thought was really powerful and like spot on for where we are in the calendar, as you were pointing out, right? This is the season of anguish in the Jewish calendar, and sadness and heartbreak, and to hold it, to really, like you said, turn towards it and even pursue it. Not only am I not going to ignore this, I'm going to investigate it with compassion and curiosity. Um, is the only way, to transform it, so that it actually has the potential to be transformed into joy, which I take it is what you're getting at, right?
Yeah. And I think it's especially like this is, I think, a challenge. I've found this year to be particularly challenging. I think because there's been so much already that I feel like, okay, enough,
Mm-hmm.
die. Like this is must speak. I've had enough of this. Um, um, but I think, I keep coming back to this image I have. I used to be a nursery school teacher when I was younger, and um, and many people who've, if you've spent time with toddlers, you'll be able to relate to this. You'll be busy with something, and a toddler will be there, like pulling, wants your attention, demanding your attention, right? And you're just like, I just need to finish this thing. I'm in the middle of something. Can you, come back later? And then, but if you turn to them, it's just like, look, I'm wearing blue shoes today, right? And I think oftentimes, um, it's the struggle that's the hardest part, is that struggle of pushing away,
Mm-hmm.
um, and um, allowing ourselves to turn towards it. In a sense, it's like that child that just is, wants our attention just for a little time, just wants to be acknowledged,
Mm-hmm.
wants to be given a little care and love, right?
Right.
um,
But
yeah.
that's good. Just hit pause for a second there, because I think the part that I'm a little stuck on, maybe others are as well, is um, the distinction between joy and the compassion or tenderness that you're describing, both in the practice that we just did and also that example you're just giving, right?
Right.
Like, it's more like the analogy is of a child who's crying, right, and needing attention, and
Yeah.
there might be five other children also, right? And um, is the difference is that the message here is not turning to each of those kids and saying, what's the, let's be, let's laugh,
Yeah.
let's, I don't think it is anyway. What you're describing is, you know being seen and acknowledged, right,
Yeah.
without judgment. So that's what
Yeah.
I wanted to get. That's the distinction I wanted to dig into a little bit here. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right, and I think it's also like, if you know the situation of being like, when you're able to allow yourself to have a really good cry,
Right.
and not worry, that, for one reason or other you have to be strong, or you have to hold yourself together. And actually, a really good cry, frequently it can feel almost joyous.
Mm-hmm.
You Um,
That's the
uh,
amazing thing, right, about grief and joy, is that they seem like they're the flip side of the same coin, right? A lot
yeah,
of the same physical reactions happen. Crying, the tears that flow, that sometimes we can't tell where they're coming from, or whether they're coming from both. And also dark humor, right, um, is also
yeah.
plays that role.
Although I'm not exactly certain about dark humor, because I think part of the power of the kind of joy um, and the sadness, that entering into the sadness that he's talking about, is exactly sort of being fully present with what's there, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so I noticed that there were some questions that sort of
Yes.
flew
Yep.
by, but
But
I'm not
there's
able to see the whole
okay.
chat.
So let me take a look.
So
So one of them is about anger. Actually, I find myself angry all the time about things that I used to find sad. I want to use my anger as an invitation to question what kinds of self-reflection questions could lead me to equanimity. There's a lot right there.
there is a
Um,
lot. Yeah.
how do we use anger? What do we? Well, I guess maybe we can frame it as uh, here we were talking about sadness, right? Now we're talking about anger. How do we hold our anger? Um, I don't know that equanimity is necessarily the goal, but as much as awareness, right? But is there a way you would apply this to anger, you think?
I think the same thing goes with anger. I mean, anger is another one of those feelings that we tend to want to push away,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We tend to either want to push it away or want to let it just sort of, take us on a roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we have to sit with anger and to simply feel what's there
Mm-hmm.
is the big challenge. And it's also very empowering because, first of all, frequently we find that there's something else there underneath when we do the exploring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and secondly, because it means that then if we can sit with the anger, then we can make the decisions that we want to, not the decisions that the anger is um, demanding.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think it's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
You
I think,
know,
yeah,
um, I think it's very similar.
I,
Um, yeah,
yeah, agreed.
there was somebody else also who asked a question very early on in the chat. I can't seem to be able to
Oh, okay.
scroll through the chat. So
Well, how do you perceive the connection between comfort and remembering or experiencing pain or loss? And how does one begin to transform that into joy? How do you perceive the connection between comfort and experiencing pain or loss and transform that into joy?
right, and I'm curious because the person said remembering. Yeah, remembering pain and
Mm-hmm.
loss.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking to see others. Hmm, how do you stop obsessing even though you don't want to obsess? Well, let's try to take those into the last few minutes of conversation. And actually, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have the melody to
Yeah.
mitzvah, let's. I think we should go out with that. But before we do that,
Uh-huh.
um, you pointed out this Shabbat is Rosh Chodesh Av, which and the month of Av has this moniker Menachem Av, comfort, right? That the comfort that there's like an element of comfort built into Av, even though we're still on this trajectory of heartbreak until the ninth of Av, right?
Yeah.
And then we have 4 Shabbatot of consolation leading up to New Year. And in the Jewish calendar, joy doesn't come into the vocabulary until Sukkot and Simchat Torah, which literally has the word in it, right? So I think I wanted to just point out that the arc from sadness, grief, loss, anguish to a joy is not instantaneous. This teaching today is, a piece of that larger process of moving through all the feelings, whether including the anger that was referred to, including, whatever the emotions are. This is a practice. Um, and feel free to correct me or add. The practice is simply bearing witness with love, compassion, and spaciousness to the real emotions that are present, in order for them to move through us. That sound?
Yeah. It's interesting also. We don't have Simcha coming in until Sukkot, but we do have Oneg because of Shabbat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Shem Mishmuel, who I've been spending a lot of time looking at, he talks about oneg and its relationship to Shabbat and sort of the way that it can help us sort of center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's that being still that he talks about as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You want to take us out
sure,
with a little Rebbe Nachman? That's great.
sure. Mitzvah gedola liat besimcha tamid. Mitzvah gedola liat besimcha tamid. Mitzvah gedola liat besimcha. Mitzvah gedola liat besimcha tamid. Mitzvah gedola liat besimcha. Mitzvah gedola liat besimcha tamid.
Now, there's a beautiful way to end it. Thank you. A lot of appreciation all around. And then Rabbi Monique Mayer is letting us know that there's a dance to that too. So that's tough to do on Zoom, but
Yeah.
we'll have to integrate that in somehow. All right, Heather. Thank you as
Okay.
always. It was wonderful, so wonderful, and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Sit into Shabbat, into Rosh Chodesh also. With Marita Anderson tomorrow at the usual time. Look forward to seeing you all. Thanks, Adi. Thanks, Heather. Thanks to all of you, and to Renee and Harris. Be well, everyone.